Welcome to podcast number 2 of the Smart Knowledge U podcast series. Today is Saturday, February 21st, 2015, and just a quick announcement. Some people had requested that I make the podcasts available in downloadable MP3 files, so we're going to post them after posting them to our YouTube channel, which is Smart Knowledge U. So you can just search YouTube for Smart Knowledge U, and you'll find our YouTube channel. And you can subscribe to get notification of future podcasts or just future videos we make. And we're going to be making the downloadable MP3 files available on our blog. So you just go to our website, www.smartknowledgeu.com. Again, www.smartknowledgeu.com, and then just click on the blog tab, and you'll find the downloadable MP3 files uploaded there. Okay, so today's subject, the first podcast we did was we talked about the potential Grexit, the Brian Williams, U.S. news anchor fiasco, and we talked about briefly how war's a racket and how you got to connect all the dots. Today, our topic will be without diversity, there is no truth. So what I mean by that is a lot of people that we encounter on a daily basis have very little diversity in their lives. So whether it means hanging out with the same people that they work with after work, so there's no diversification even in their social life because their social life is attached to the people they work with or the same type of industry people, whether there's no diversification in their social life and nationality because they're American, all their friends are American. You see that even in immigrant communities. If you go to Miami, you see all the Cubans live together, all the Haitians live together. People tend to gravitate towards what is familiar, which is really unfortunate because human beings are just human beings. So there's good human beings of every career, every nationality, every race, every socioeconomic status, and there's bad people in all those categories as well. So same thing happens with socioeconomic status, especially because it's especially rare to see, say, people that are in the upper socioeconomic status ever mingling with people from a lower socioeconomic status. And that's really, really a shame. It's really ridiculous when you think about it because in essence they're saying there's nothing that someone that is not of my socioeconomic status can teach me. I have nothing to learn from these people, and I can guarantee you that is patently a false belief. So we live in a world today where truth is a rare commodity, especially in the news, because as I said in podcast number 1, we talked about the Brian Williams fiasco. And if you hang out with like-minded people, I believe you will very rarely ever challenge your beliefs. And you'll very rarely ever question your belief structure and critically examine whether or not your beliefs are right, or perhaps, as is shockingly the case with a lot of people, have just been adopted from what people have told you to believe your entire life. So some people never realize, I really believe, like they're from the day they're born and then until the day they die, they never come to the realization that nearly all of their beliefs that they have formed over the whole timeline of their lives are based upon what other people told them to believe, and not because they, have ever engaged in any kind of investigative journey into their beliefs and then settled upon, after critical introspection, that, yeah, this really makes sense. So I think that it's really hard to get to the bottom of the truth about anything in life without a great amount of diversity in your life. So let me tell you why. I was actually listening to this other podcast a couple of months ago, and can't remember whose podcast it was. I think it was actually Joe Rogan's podcast because on it, George St. Pierre, who used to be the mixed martial arts champion in his weight class, was telling the story. And basically George St. Pierre, otherwise known as GSP, told a story about a fish that was removed from the ocean. He said, imagine if a fish was caught by a fisherman and removed from the ocean for the first time in his life, and he saw life above sea level for the first time. So his whole life, he's just been swimming around the ocean, had seen other fish, other large mammals like turtles. He's seen dolphins, he's seen sharks, he's seen coral, he's seen sea anemone, and sea cucumbers. But basically, his whole perspective is limited to the ocean because he cannot, like a fish cannot travel outside the ocean and survive. And then he said, so for the first time, this fisherman carried him around in a bag of water, and he saw life above sea level, and he saw all these other fantastic creatures that he had heard of, were rumored, but no one had ever been able to prove them as true. So he saw elephants, he saw monkeys, he saw cheetahs, he saw lions, he saw birds, and creatures he'd never seen before that seemed too fantastic to be true. And then he looked up and he saw airplanes flying in the sky. He looked down, he saw trains flying by on a track system. He saw people in controlling vehicles on another transportation grid. And he didn't even know what they were called, but these were cars. And they had the ability, he saw, to travel 1,000 times faster than any fish could swim. And they could travel in these vehicles for thousands of kilometers without ever even slowing down and getting tired. And then he saw buildings that reached into the heavens, and he had never ever seen these things before. And so imagine that this fisherman carried him around in a bag, and he got to see this, what seemed to be a parallel universe to him, for an entire 2 weeks. And then the fisherman took him back to the ocean and released him in the ocean. And when he was returned, he went back to his friends and told them all these other fantastic things that his friends had just heard rumors of, but everyone that believed in these rumors were looked upon as loony bins and just insane other fish. And when he told his other friends, no, this is real, it seemed all too fantastic to believe. So his other fish friends told him to stop believing in these crazy conspiracy theories, and everyone in his school of fish laughed at him and mocked him for these stories he was telling. And this was a great story. I think that's why I'm retelling it on my podcast, because it's kind of what people's perspectives become when they have very little or no diversity in their lives. See, people have such a narrow-minded view that their view basically becomes the fish's view. Although it seems vast to them because it's an ocean, it's just a fraction of reality because there's a whole other world they don't see, because these people don't have any diversity in their lives, and the type of people they hang out with career-wise, the type of people they hang out with race-wise, the type of people they hang out with nationality-wise, the type of people they hang out with socioeconomic-wise. So we limit ourselves, unfortunately, a lot of times to this tunnel vision. We think it's a vast perspective because the ocean is vast, but it's just a fraction of reality. And it's extremely narrow perspective that we get from only hanging out with like-minded people that think like us. And then when there's other people that don't think like us and they tell us of a different reality, we tend to mock them and marginalize them and discredit them and not even listen to them when they could be certainly telling us a truth that we just have not been exposed to. So creatures that only know one way of life, that think all the same, believe there's only one reality. And that doesn't just apply to fish, it applies to human beings too. And I'm going to tell you some anecdotes that support this position. When I went to school many years ago at the University of Pennsylvania, I used to hang out at SmartKnowledgeU a lot because I had some good friends from high school that went there. And when I met their friends always said I didn't seem like a UPenn student at all. And I thought that was a strange comment. They would say, man, you don't seem like you're from UPenn. So I said, what does that mean? And they said, well, you just don't seem like other Penn students we've met. They don't seem to, they seem to think, if I can speak, that they said SmartKnowledgeU's an inferior school and we're not as smart as them and we're kind of below them. So that's even interesting that even among universities, people's thinking get stuck into a mindset. And ironically, this is the year of the ram. Some people can say the ram is the same as the sheep in the Chinese lunar calendar. So this is a year especially where we all need not to be sheep and not to become part of a herd that all thinks the same. Because if we do, I guarantee you, if you go back and listen to my SmartKnowledgeU podcast number 1, it's going to cost you dearly in your financial outlook and future. Because there's going to be a lot of lies and a lot of propaganda that continue to be told in the mainstream media that if you don't have this diverse mindset, you're never going to see the truth until it blindsides you and it's too late. So, after I graduated from uni, I worked in some of the poorest and highest crime neighborhoods in Philly. And I worked with kids that I would see on the news stations later that evening, involved in riots in their schools. And, so these were really, really rough neighborhoods in North Philly and Southwest Philly and South Philly. I'm sorry, North Philly, not Northwest, it's Southwest Philly. And because these neighborhoods are so rough, I had to go visit all of them on a weekly basis because I helped manage 7 different community healthcare centers. I would carry a knife with me every day to work, just for security reasons. Because I would work in neighborhoods literally where I would see chalk outlines from homicide, crime scenes, I would say at least once every couple of weeks. The neighborhoods where I worked, I knew people that had been shot. I'd see people walk openly in the streets carrying guns. So, to me it was normal just to carry a knife with me every day. But to others, say that worked in their posh corporate towers and safe offices, it might have seemed extreme to carry a knife, and they might have looked at me as weird without really understanding my situation. But for my situation, that was my reality. That was normal. And when I was in Los Angeles later in my career, when I moved to LA, I volunteered and mentored gang members. And even though I had worked in all these harsh neighborhoods in Philly and had mentored Philly kids that were growing up in these harsh conditions, that, they told me they carried weapons to school every day too. Not because they were bad kids, but they said because they feel they needed it for security. Because they said on the walking home, this is crazy, true story, from school, that they felt there was a high possibility they could get jumped and robbed. So they would carry weapons with them just for their own protection, and not that they were bad kids again. So, when I moved to LA, even though I had seen this for, I believe I worked there for 4 or 5 years before I went back to grad school. And, I would ask these gang members, like, the stupid corporate questions that I had been asked, like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? What do you want to do? Because I wanted to try to get a beat on how I could help them change their lives. And when these kids I were working with were 14, and they said they had no idea if they would even be alive in 5 years. So they said, man, we think just in terms of next year. We can't even think about 5 years down the road. And they say, my wish is just to be alive next year. So that was their dream. That's crazy. At 14, just to be alive at 15. And when I heard that, that made me realize I was asking the wrong questions. And, at the time, I was mentoring these kids, and I was 10 years older than them. But these kids were teaching me a lot more about life than I could teach them, because they were like 14 going on 40, because some of them had to be so mature. Some of them had to, raise their 4-year-old siblings because, they never knew their fathers. Their mom was a drunk or irresponsible. I actually had kids that said they would be alone sometimes for weeks on end because their mom would just disappear and wouldn't know, and they had no dad. So it was just a crazy, crazy world to be exposed to. But in working with them, I realized that our lives had much more in common than anyone would ever think that an Ivy League grad and a gang member could ever have, because they had the same dreams of just wanting to be happy. Everyone really just wants to be happy in life, right? But at the same time, there was something truly invigorating about stripping life down to survival. A lot of people never go through this, and I think it's super important for people to kind of go through some iteration of this survival game to really become mature about life and to really gain a good perspective about life. Because even though it wasn't my life, when I heard these stories daily, we're talking for 4 years straight in Philly, and then another 4 years in Los Angeles when I was there. It was invaluable to be around people who face life and death experiences on a daily basis, because it gave me an entirely different perspective on life that was invaluable to me as I move forward in life. And I made another video. I don't know if those listening to the podcast have seen it, but you can look it up on my YouTube channel. I think just YouTube, SmartKnowledgeU, martial arts, and you'll find that video. I made about my martial arts experience on this channel. And my teacher really, wasn't just about looking good, and your techniques he really wanted. He didn't care about any of that stuff, you know, because he would always say, "Oh, this Hollywood stuff is ridiculous because that's not how people fight in real life." And he would say, "I'm going to teach you to really fight for real, and you guys are going to have to fight every Friday." So every Friday was fight night, and we have to fight every week. And you know, the initial time you're super nervous about fighting, and you know, but you get over it because you're just focused when you're fighting. So you get over that nervousness pretty quickly. And then, you know, if you haven't been in a real fight before and punched really hard and kicked really hard, you get over that too, you know, as well. Because you realize, oh, you know, it hurts, but that just compels you to become better skilled and better at your technique. So you don't get punched like that again or kicked like that again. And I say martial arts is invaluable. I'll talk about that more in length in this video I made, so you can go look it up if you want. Because of the struggles and the humility that these struggles teach you, because you will always fight someone, I guarantee you, that can physically dominate you, because there's always going to be someone better than you if you're training at a good school whose skills are better than yours. And when you're physically dominated, say for like 20 minutes, that is a really humiliating experience, and you learn a lot of humility from that. And even when you get to the point where you can physically dominate most others in your dojo, your sensei will always still be more skilled than you, or your sifu will always still be more skilled than you. So I remember that my sensei would always bring those down to earth that got arrogant, because you can see it sometimes, you know, people kind of puff their chest out and start getting arrogant and proud when they become really good and really skilled. And then our sensei would respond by actually making that person, and that included me at one point. At one point I got like that too, by fighting him. And then, you know, whenever I spar him, he would put me on the ground time and time and time again. And, you know, you'd be put right back in your place again. So, you know, I never understand why people always want to be as comfortable as possible, because it's the struggles in life that allow you to see and understand the truth. So I'm saying, when I worked with these kids that went through daily life and death struggles, I'm not saying that's what you need to do, but you need to go through some serious struggles like you do in martial arts or some other portion of your life if you've been, you know, blessed with a privileged life to really gain a true perspective on life. Because I guarantee you that no one born with a silver spoon in his or her mouth that has not deliberately sought struggle in their life will ever understand the reality and truth of life. And I believe, you know, that's why I saw once on Twitter that J.P. Morgan, Jamie Dimon's daughter, I can't remember her name, like made the mistake of putting up something like, "Oh, I'm investigating crime. Who can give me some good stories to follow?" And everybody just slammed her by saying, "Go investigate your dad, Jamie Dimon at J.P. Morgan, because he's the biggest crook of all." And so she had to take down that tweet. And I think, you know, I'm just speculating here. Of course, I don't know her, so I can't say for certain. But I am guessing that she probably has not had any type of real struggle in her life. So that's why she really has a zero understanding of what kind of person her father really is. I mean, I can't really say for sure because I don't know her again. But I am guessing that is why she made that crucial mistake and then got bombarded with, you know, hundreds of tweets back that she should investigate her criminal father that shocked her. So, you know, I could think of many times in Philadelphia when I saw stuff that made me really appreciate life. Because, you know, in the kind of neighborhoods I worked in, I remember once in North Philly, I came out of the subway, you know, going to our healthcare center, and there were dozens of cops and dozens of shell casings all over the street. And I asked the cops, "Yo, what's going on?" And I found out that there was just a shootout between cops and drug dealers that I literally, as they told me, I literally missed by like a couple minutes. It just ended. So that was kind of like a little bit freaky. I remember meeting former employees of drug cartels that told me they witnessed people that had been executed right in front of them. I remember a young kid in Philly that I mentored, and he was a kid because he was only 16 years old, and he told me that some of his friends have been gunned down and killed right in front of him. So when you're just one step removed from stories like this, it makes you question a lot about the system. That's the most important thing. Why some people have so much opportunity while other neighborhoods are just crumbling, and people that live in these neighborhoods have none. Because I guarantee you, I met a lot of great people with great hearts. I mean, they weren't acting admirably all the time, but I guarantee you I could stick a kid with a silver spoon in their mouth in these neighborhoods, and put them in those neighborhoods for 8 or 9 years, and these kids are going to make a lot of mistakes too, because it becomes about survival. So I could tell you that I never would have had the curiosity nor the critical thinking skills to have started my company SmartKnowledgeU had I not gone through these experiences when I was younger. So let me tell you this other story that's really interesting, because I remember one time when I was going to this after-school mentoring workshop I ran, and it was at Ben Franklin High School, which, you know, this is years later we're talking about now. And it's funny because that school, sometimes I follow the Philly papers, is still in the news for crazy stuff, like students knocking out teachers flat cold. And it's just still a really violent school because there were actually, that school was in lockdown, literally. There were metal detectors to detect guns, but I knew for a fact there were guns in that school when I was working there. And so it didn't catch all the guns that were coming in, and then the hallways were locked down and monitored with real Philly PD in that school. But when I went to one of these workshops, like I walked in and I remember this kid said to me, Mr. Kim, did you hear that they murdered Bruce Lee's son? So all the kids I worked with were black, and I didn't know that, you know, that they looked up to Asians at all. And they said, yeah, they killed him just like they killed his father. And I had no idea what they were talking about when they kept saying they. They kept saying, they killed him, they killed him. So I asked them, who is this they you keep talking about? They say, they, come on, the same people that have always been screwing us over. So he said, you know, they killed the people, all the people that fight for us. And he said, the same people that killed Malcolm, the same people that killed Bob Marley, the same people that killed his father, Bruce, they killed Brandon. And I remember thinking back then, because I was in my early 20s, these kids were like 14, 15, 16. Man, that's some crazy conspiracy talk, you know? So I remember like thinking now when I hear people say, when I talk about the financial truth, and people say that's some crazy conspiracy talk, that was me when I was a lot younger, when I was in my early 20s. So I had not even heard of rumors, because this happened when I first started working in these communities. And I had not even heard of the rumors that the CIA had murdered Malcolm, the CIA had murdered Bob Marley, and even though to this day I believe that they had zero to do with killing Brandon Lee, I don't think that he was that important for the CIA to kill him. But I started researching the powers that be because of the rumors these kids would tell me. And as I worked in these neighborhoods, I do recall, you know, back then, remembering hearing about, and you know, we're talking about the late 90s. I remember hearing all these rumors in these neighborhoods that the government was bringing crack into these neighborhoods. And this wasn't even LA. This was in Philly. And I remember thinking, that was crazy. I was like, where did these rumors come from? I was thinking, why in the world would the government want to bring crack into these neighborhoods? Because these neighborhoods are already so poor, so ridden with crime, that these aren't the kind of people that are going to take away their jobs that they got to keep down. So I was like, why would the government bring crack into these neighborhoods? I couldn't understand it because I didn't really know the truth of what was going on. But later, these rumors were proven to be true because the CIA employed Freeway Ricky Ross in LA to move crack cocaine to fund the Contras in Nicaragua. And in fact, Jeremy Renner recently just made a movie about this called Kill the Messenger, so you can go check that out if you want to learn more about it. But the crazy thing is this kind of stuff is still going on, and people still think it's conspiracy theories, even though it's been proven as a fact. And so just in September 2007, there was a CIA plane that they knew was a CIA plane because it had been used in at least 3 rendition flights where they were bringing prisoners to torture to Guantanamo Bay. The same CIA plane crashed in the Yucatan Peninsula coming back into the United States. And on board, they had 6 tons of cocaine and 1 ton of heroin. Likely the heroin was coming from Afghanistan, where they employed U.S. military soldiers to protect the opium and poppy production in Afghanistan. And later, the Mexican government said, no, it wasn't 6 tons of cocaine. It was only 3.7 tons of cocaine and no heroin. And that was probably because they probably negotiated as being corrupt themselves, the government of Mexico, that the CIA had to give them some of their stash so they could sell it and use it for whatever black ops they wanted, or just to keep the money. So, you know, if you're listening to this on the YouTube channel, I'll put links below so you can go check out these stories. Because these stories sound too outlandish to be true, but just remember, just like that fish that was brought out of the ocean and saw a whole different world that he didn't know about, there's a whole different world out there that is true that you will never ever learn about if you don't embrace diversity in your life. So, even with career-wise, like, you see a lot of people that are finance just stick with finance people and go out and socialize with finance people. And scientists tend to do the same, but scientists may be too linear in their thinking. If they hung out with martial arts instructors or yoga instructors or Pilates instructors, then they may be exposed to a type of spiritual thinking that they never are exposed to. So, even today, when you look at, just finance people, there's a lot of people in finance that still think trickle-down economic works. The idea that tax breaks or other economic benefits provided to the top 1% of people in their country, or, in the case of the United States, the top 0.1%, that will inevitably, those added riches given to these already filthy rich people will benefit the poorer members of society, because it will trickle down as they create jobs to the other people in society. But the whole thing is that trickle-down theory, the fact that everyone can pull themselves up by their bootstraps, that everyone's on equal footing, is totally false. 100% fake, false, and that's a fact, whether you agree with it or not, because due to how the fractional reserve banking system works, and due to the fact that the richest people in the world always get access to money when it's first created, they're getting money before it's devalued, to put it to the stock market, to put it to the real estate market, and when it's already boomed, and then the effects trickle down, say, to the middle class, that value of the purchasing power of that country is already devalued by, say, 40 or 50%. So just to get back to even, then the middle class has to make 80% or 100% gains just to get back to the starting line. And when it trickles down to those that are the poorest, those earning the equivalent of $2 a day or less, forget about it. Forget about it. There's no way they can ever get out of poverty. So to say people are on equal footing means that, these people who believe this have no diversity in their lives, because they're not getting any kind of opinion other than the academics they hang out with and other than the people at work they hang out with. So, and people, it's amazing to me that people don't see the major stresses and the major financial earthquakes that are coming later this year. And even when I woke up this morning, I looked at the headlines. Oh, Greece agrees to extension of 4-month extension of bailout plan from the Eurogroup. And I really haven't had time to really look into the what the exact deal that was agreed upon, but I really doubt that Greece is going to stay in the EU if they're forced to take the same punishing covenants that the bankers forced them to take in 2010. Because, already this week I saw Reuters reported, oh, Greece agrees to the deal. And then Syriza said, we did not agree to a deal. Reuters, you're lying. Then the Eurogroup president actually tweeted, Greece agrees to 6-month, or I received the papers for 6-month extension of bailout from Greece. And Syriza said, no, you're lying, Eurogroup president. So how can you believe it? So this is the whole point of having a diverse group of people around you that's going to expand the way you think, and you'll realize, hey, the mainstream media is just propaganda. So if I believe that, I am going to make some really poor decisions in my life. And, there is no equal opportunity, and that's why, the recent elite meeting at Davos, Switzerland, of all these bankers and politicians, that former hedge fund manager Robert Johnson said, quote, I'm going to read this to you, hedge fund managers all over the world who are buying airstrips and farms in places like New Zealand, end quote. He said, quote, very powerful people are telling us they're scared. And he said the elite, quote, are seeing increasing evidence of social instability and violence. So if the people that have the best access to real information, all these people with millions of billions of dollars, are getting these bug-out places because they think there's going to be extreme violence coming, you should start asking yourself, no, don't start saying these are conspiracy theories, because they're backed up by all the people that work with the elite. Stuart Wallace, executive director of the New Economics Foundation, who was also invited to Davos, Switzerland, said, quote, getaway cars at airstrips in New Zealand and all that sort of thing are basically a way to get off. If they could get off, meaning the elite, onto another planet, some of them would, end quote. So it's almost the idea of that movie Elysium with Matt Damon, where these people know that they have screwed people over so much that when we get into the SHTF scenario, they don't even want to be on this planet. And this is the reality that mainstream media is not presenting to you. They are lying every day. As I said, I would not even be surprised if they're lying again about what the real terms of this Eurogroup experiment are, because I really do not see, I think, if anything, because the Eurogroup wanted a 6-month extension, so why did Greece just take the 4-month extension, which is only extends it out right before the debt maturity is to come due? Because I think the Greeks really want to work out some loan that doesn't have these restricted type of debt covenants, and that 4 months just gives them time to work out some other alternative to not be screwed over by these banksters. So, it's really interesting, because when I look at my life, I've just been very lucky, because I've worked with some of the poorest people on earth and some of the richest people on earth when I was working for a Wall Street firm before I saw the immorality and criminality and quit out of disgust. And even when I was working corporate and healthcare, I trained heavily in martial arts, which again gave me a different perspective on life, because that really helped my thinking. Because even then, my instructor was ex-military that trained Navy SEALs from time to time in martial arts, and because of that, my whole class was infantry, Army, Rangers, military people. And many people tell me that I can't have opinions about war if I've never served in war, which I haven't. But I think that's a ridiculous kind of argument, because if you look at all these commentators and mass media, they're basically just like spokespeople. They're hired spokespeople by the elite to convince people to believe their rubbish, garbage propaganda that have zero journalistic integrity. And that's why you get people like Brian Williams there. They're actors. They're paid monkeys to read the teleprompters that have no journalistic integrity. And they spout very strong opinions about war, all the time, to influence how a whole nation perceives that war. Whereas I've probably had more better conversations with people than them, even though they've been to Iraq, because they're getting basically the stories that their bosses want them to see. Whereas I've been to the homes of Army Rangers, ate dinner with their families, listened to horrific stories of them telling me when soldiers next to them had their legs blown off and they'd had to carry them for miles to rescue them, and how they'd have nightmares about that. And so even though we obviously disagreed on some points about war, as I'm very anti-war, unless there's no possible negotiation possible between nations, obviously my friends as military men, they're far more supportive of the interventions they engage in. But that, I've learned that just because someone disagrees with you doesn't mean you can't be really good friends with them. And furthermore, because I trained daily with these people and fought these people in class, so there's nothing like sparring with another person that will make you close with another human being. So I learned the value of being friends with people that think very differently than you, because that forces you to really refine your critical thinking and reasoning skills. So if I told my friend, look, I support you as a friend, but I disagree with the deployments that you're engaging in, it would force me to really be able to explain my reasoning behind why I disagree. You can't just say, hey, I disagree, that's wrong. Like all these Bill O'Reilly characters would say, oh, you're a pinhead. That is, they just engage in these ad hominem attacks, and they don't can't argue these people on a critical reasoning level, and can't present facts to back up their arguments. But when you become friends with people that you disagree with, it forces you to be able to really refine your thinking skills. So that's why I encourage everyone to start hanging out with people outside your country. Even just 2 months ago, I was on holiday and I met 2 people from Austria, and when we began speaking, it actually evolved to politics, which is really interesting, because I really have found out, because just the other week I was talking to these 2 French people. They were actually only 19 and 20, and they brought up politics, which is really interesting, because you don't get that out of Americans. You don't get super young people that want to talk politics, and they can talk very civilly, that won't get, a super heated argument about it, because I tend to see with Americans, they get super heated arguments, and they just start yelling at you. But you can have very civil arguments and logical arguments. And with the Austrians, they asked me where I was from, like about half an hour into our conversation. I said, I'm from America. They said, really? They're like, you don't see, you're like super different than all the other Americans we spoke to. You don't seem American. And I said, what? I kind of just laughed. They said, what does that mean? They said, well, most Americans we speak to are very, a closed mind. They think America's right and all their policies. And I said, look, that's because, like, I have lived in 3 different countries. My whole life, I surrounded myself with a lot of diversity in socioeconomic classes and nationalities and races and religions. So I've really been open-minded because of that, because I've embraced a lot of diversity in my life. So I don't, I said, the problem is that why you meet a lot of Americans like this is because a lot of them listen to the mainstream news, and the mainstream news is so biased and such propaganda, and they don't realize it's propaganda. And I said, I myself, from a very young age, have surrounded myself with a lot of diverse people, so I realized at a very young age that I was listening to a lot of propaganda and didn't buy into that. So I said, you can't really blame these other people you meet for thinking that way, because they're just getting brainwashed by the propaganda on mainstream news. So, I've actually even seen friends of mine that grown up in U.S. and Asia when they I have friends that moved to Italy, France, Switzerland, other countries in South America like Brazil and Colombia, Venezuela, and I saw how much their thinking changed in a good way once they were exposed to people that thought very differently than them. So I think diversity is super important because it will give you an alternate way of looking at the same concept. And that is even super important because today I think that the definition of success is just wrong. Success today is the least diverse word ever, at least in my lifetime, since when I was young. Today, the only definition of success is if you have a lot of money. So people think that if you make a ton of money, you're successful, and if you don't, you're unsuccessful. But what if we really redefine, because we hang out with diverse people and say, oh, that's garbage to define success that way. And because people define success that way, it drives them into the highest paying jobs. Because when I was in business school, again, many eons ago, that everyone just wanted to go in banking because all they looked at was the highest paying industry. And I know that a lot of people just went for the money rather than doing anything that had a resemblance to something they were passionate about. But what if you taught someone, hey, follow your passion and be happy first. Chase happiness and chase your passion and money will come eventually. Then think of, if everyone thought this way, how much better our world would be. Because you would have people creating things to make a better life for people. You probably have 1,000 Steve Jobs out there, just inventing and creating all kinds of things to improve the quality of life rather than just going into the most non-productive industry ever, which is banking. And probably it's even a misnomer to say it's non-productive. It's anti-productive because all it does is transfer wealth from the middle class and the poor to the uber wealthy. So it's extremely anti-productive industry. That's what people go for because it pays the most money, unfortunately. So let me know what you think. If you're watching this or listening to this on YouTube, please comment below. Let me know if you agree that. Tell me stories yourself. I would love to hear stories of where you met someone that thinks completely differently than you, and that totally helped change the way you believed about something that you entirely believe to be true. Those are the kind of stories I want to hear, where you believe something to be true for your whole life, but then met someone that changed the way you thought about this, and you know that what you believed for 20, 30, 40 years of your life was a lie. And because that's going to be an important thing to really understanding what's going to happen moving forward in this world today, whether it's potential war between U.S. and Russia and China, or whether it's financial collapse of some European bank that people didn't see coming. It's really going to be important to have diversity to get to the bottom of the truth of all these matters. So that's it for today in this podcast. Remember to be kind and compassionate to another. And I think if you embrace more diversity in your life, that you will see the amount of happiness also increase in your life as well. So let me also know, before I leave, what other topics you want to see me address in future podcasts, because I'll take some of your ideas and try to address them as well. Okay, thanks for listening. Until next time, Have a great day or night, depending where in the world you're living. And as always, remember to stay intensely curious. So long.